Well, good afternoon, LinkedIn. My name is Joel Bennett, and I would like to welcome you to this episode of Practical Leadership, an opportunity for you to learn how to be a more effective leader and to start weaving in leadership habits into your daily work. If you are tuning in live today, please drop a note in the chat and say hello. Tell us where you're tuning in from, and it's always more fun for us to know that there's somebody else out there listening. And so feel free to light up the comments, not just now, but throughout the session. And if you were one of the folks that joined us last week for our Building Leadership Habits session, feel free to add in the comments as well. What kind of things have you been practicing as a result of that session to help you be a better leader or maybe to reach your goals for this year? So as we're dropping things in here, seeing some comments come in, continue throughout the day to stay active there. Let me see here. Looks like we've got Trevor back from Brooklyn Island or Iowa. Thanks for being here. Michelle, our first Aussie in the comments. And I should say good morning to our Aussie folks instead of good afternoon. Belinda, Jamie from Tennessee. Jamie, great to see you. Rachel from Pella. Joe Tomaselli from Florida. Joe, so great to see you, man. Phil from Melbourne. Excellent. So we're getting a fair amount of folks. Keep driving those through. We'd love to see more and more folks as we go. During these sessions, what we try to do is just tackle real life leadership topics, challenges that leaders have on the job. And what we try to do is encourage you to take what you're learning during our sessions and take real applicable steps to weave those into your own leadership practices or the team culture you're trying to create. So I've asked leadership experts from around the world to join me to share their perspectives, their experience as well. And so today I'm excited to be joined by Mark Bloodworth, owner of Lifeblood Performance in Melbourne, Australia. Mark partners with companies and communities to develop their leadership and drive team ownership. And I've known Mark for a number of years now, and it's been fantastic to get to know him. So thanks for joining me, Mark. It's great to see you again.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Joel. I've always admired your work, and you know that ever since we went down that big zip line in Whistler and had the Aussie versus the American zip line competition.
Yeah, and that's a story for another day, but I'm pretty sure the Aussies won that one. So today our topic's going to be on passion-driven leadership, and I need to tell you when this topic was teed up by folks on LinkedIn about what they wanted to be or us to talk about or to explore. Mark was the very first person I thought of, and I think by the end of today's call, you're going to see why. And so while I'm excited to get Mark's thoughts here in just a few minutes, before we get started, I again want to reinforce that I would love for you to stay active in the comment section. We have a number of people that have signed up for this, and all of you have some wisdom to share. And so please share your perspectives, any questions you have along the way. Also, if you're watching this as a recording, you're not off the hook. So I want to hear from you as well. Drop your thoughts and comments in, and we'll respond to them either during the session or after the session concludes. So we've had a number of folks drop back in from all areas. See some folks from Kansas City, Canada, another from Brooklyn, Iowa, and a ton of folks here for Mark from Australia. Pretty sure none of the Aussies came to see me. So appreciate everybody jumping in there, and it looks like we've got a full house. So what do you say we get started, Mark?
Absolutely. Let's rip into it, mate.
All right. So we often hear in the news, articles, LinkedIn, about how leaders need to be more passionate about their work and their teams. But how would you define this topic of passion-driven leadership?
It's an excellent question, Joel. For me, I'll start with what it's not. And what it's not is passionate leading your way. A lot of people use that, and this is probably my key takeaway. Differentiate between I'm passionate and I've got all the best intentions going on in my head, so therefore I know what we're doing, we're going this way. Now, if you want to, in some terms it's called extreme passion, extreme out there passion. It's not the way to connect your team and actually lead people. It's a way of shutting down speak up culture. Extreme passion can be dangerous. So what we're looking at to be passionate is what are you passionate about, right? And so for me, It's passionate leadership. It's not doing it your way. It's about identifying what you're passionate about and then leading the team that way so that you can share some of that passion. Because if you're in business looking for leverage and advantage, or if you're in a team sport or whatever it might be, you can't be that passionate yourself and expect the other one just to get on board. In fact, from my experience being extremely passionate, and it even happens to me with enthusiasm and keenness, sometimes you find it's a natural push off for people. If you're extremely passionate, people go, something's wrong. It puts them off board and they put their defenses straight up. Does that make sense, Joel?
Yeah, totally. And I think something you said there has made me thought of a couple of experiences that I've had where I can tell somebody's super passionate about maybe it's a new initiative or a new goal that we have for the company.
Yep.
But it's that passion, it almost shuts down other people, right? Because it
100%.
feels like we've already made a determination on where we're going. And although they're excited about it, it actually dampers my enthusiasm about it. Am I on track with where you're going with this?
Absolutely. You know, and there's, for the Aussies out there, there's a case, a high profile case now, just been publicised. We have a sports team, right? And I won't go into the detail of the sports team, but the coach, the head of the national team, was getting success, but was labelled as being extremely passionate. And what that did, is it's all coming out in the press now, is it shut down that speak up culture. People, the elite players, so the best players in the country playing at a world class level, felt like it wasn't their team. So that's really reinforcing exactly what you just said, Joel.
Yeah.
They felt they didn't have a say in where their team was going, and they didn't want to push back on it, and it shut down all the conversation because of that demonstration of extreme passion. Here we go, do it my way. So that filters down and can happen in a lot of places.
Yeah, and a big part of what leaders are supposed to do is obviously create a team dynamic where everybody feels like they can, provide ideas, provide perspective, provide thoughts, and hopefully influence direction. And so while that passion may be well intentioned, sometimes it actually creates the opposite.
Absolutely. And that's why when you invited me to talk about this, I was really keen to get that out in the beginning, because otherwise people can say, right, that's it, turn up the passion dial. And that could actually be really counterproductive, as you've just demonstrated, as we talked about.
Okay. So when we talk about, where leaders should focus, though, as they think about, hey, there are areas of our organization or there are goals or objectives that we've set that I want to make sure that other people are a part of. When you think of your experience, what do you see as like the biggest challenge or blockers for leaders as they lead their own businesses or their teams?
I think it's leading into what we've been talking about, Joel. It's okay, I know this business really well, and often it's people that are either have started the business, so they have very firm ideas about where the business came from, where it should be going, or they've got a strong education, so therefore they're leaning into their MBA or other stage, which is fine, right? And so either case, and that speaks to what you were just saying before. Takes people down a path where they feel like, okay, this guy's kind of got it. He's not really demonstrating any body language about being open to new ideas. Who are we to push back? What happened last time we tried to put up our ideas? So I think it's more about what blocks it in leaders is they can't actually see that there might be other ideas or there might be advantage in getting, as we're talking about, we're big on getting teams involved. Yeah. They've got a mindset that to be a strong leader, to be a good leader, I need to be the one out there with all the knowledge. And I think that sort of time has passed. You might use that in the startup phase of your business or when you're building businesses, right, where you have to be the font of all information. And that's probably an old paradigm about management and leadership. Remember the old sayings, information is power or knowledge is power and all that sort of stuff. It's not anymore. People can be sitting in the room you're speaking about and Googling what you're talking about and say, that's not right. I've got a better idea than that. Or they're tweeting out to all their friends going, mate, I'm just getting bored to death by my boss at the minute. It's a far more interactive world now. So I think that's where is one of the biggest blocks. And often, and we're digging a little bit deeper. So tell me how far you want to go down with this, Joel. Often, and we'll get into this with the leaders are feeling like, right, I've just got to demonstrate my leadership. It's my role You know, it's that's what I'm here to do.
A number of years ago, I was working with a company, and one of the things they brought me in to kind of work with them on was team culture. And one of the things they talked about was they didn't feel like people were taking ownership of their roles or ownership of projects, and this whole piece around accountability came up. But the more we dug in, one of the things I shared with them as I was interacting with their team members is they talked more about kind of a culture of me versus a culture of we. And from the perspective of, the leader was out front. They felt like they were the one that was, for lack of a better term, on stage, and that everybody needed to come along with them on their ideas or their direction. But people didn't really feel like, that they had a voice. And so we had a long discussion about, well, how do we start to switch this culture from about the leader, the me, to the we, and how do you invite other people into it? Because you can have all the knowledge in the world. You can be, an MBA, you can be a business owner for 35 years. And at the same time, there are plenty of things you don't know. And quite often the people that you've brought into the organization may. And so, it's kind of one of those hire the best people you can and then get out of their way. I think sometimes leaders trip over their own feet because they feel like they always have to be leading from the front.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right, Joel. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think once that's where the initial work needs to be done, is to allow people the freedom. And I often talk to leaders that you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You don't have to be the kingpin, the font of all information. In fact, the place will work a lot better if you invite people to get involved.
Right. So I'm seeing a lot of comments come in. I want to take a quick minute here to see what we've got. Oh, are you still there, Mark?
I am still here, mate.
Oh, sorry about that. I had a chirp on my end. I thought, oh my Lord, I may have lost him.
All good.
So I've got a couple of questions here, a couple of comments. Trevor is sharing, this whole thing about extreme passion and can often burn people out. And he says when they don't feel what you do, they end up saying, wow, this just isn't for me. And he also mentioned that sometimes he's had, had a history of maybe coming in way too hot or strong, and people may be like, what's this guy's problem? And they just kind of disconnect. For somebody like Trevor, who is recognizing for himself that maybe he does come across too strong at times, or maybe brings on too much passion, what kind of advice or wisdom could you share with him?
I'd like that's a really good. Thanks for making that comment, Trevor. The thread I want to pull on is what you were mentioning before about me versus we. And the sort of language I use often when I'm working with leaders is taking away from micromanagement into up through the stages through to what I call lead and inspire. So it's about creating that mindset that you actually, as a leader, your role is not to tell everyone what to do, to micromanage, to say here's how it is and all the rest of it. It's about getting to a situation where you've evolved the situation, the process, the working environment, the confidence, the risk taking, all the other sorts of things, up to the area where your role now is to lead and inspire others. They do the work. They run the business. You're there to grow them, to challenge them, to support them, to nudge them, to be their cheer squad, to set the big direction. You're still a leader. You're still able to say, here's where we're going. Now, how are we going to get there? At the end of the day, people they'll bang on about this for a long time. People want to be heard, valued, and respected. That's your role. Create an environment where people are feeling heard, valued, and respected. And that in itself is quite a conversation. I reckon we could have another session maybe one day on just how do you create a culture that allows that to occur. Because that it's not the telling, it's about creating that mindset to start with, to say, right, it's not about me anymore. It's about them, the team. So I'd go one step further than the me versus we. It's not me, it's you. What can I do to serve you better today to help you work on that? Does that make sense? So lead and inspire rather than micromanage.
Yeah, totally.
That and we'll move towards a stronger picture then. If people go, oh, I've got a new job description. I'm the lead and inspiration guru now, or officer, whatever we want to be, that in itself creates, okay, right, I've got to approach this differently. If I'm leading and inspiring, I can't be doing that by just preaching.
Yeah, and I love that because the mindset change is really really critical. So I work, as you know, with a lot of
Mm,
new supervisors or leaders in blue collar environments, manufacturing, construction, field service, guys that
mm,
got promoted from kind of individual contributor roles. They were the best welder, they were best construction guy. They were the ones that could climb the towers and repair things the quickest. And then they get promoted to leadership, and they do think that their job is to micromanage or to direct traffic all day long. And one of the mindset changes to kind of build on what you said also is to understand that a big part of their role now is not just to develop their people, which is really important, but part of it is to remove barriers for them to be successful, right? And so when they see that the person needs some coaching to take it to the next level, that's a barrier they need to remove. Or if they're
100%.
realizing they've overloaded them with projects and they need to kind of stay focused on
Yeah,
certain things, to have that conversation and make
yeah,
sure that that happens. And so that mindset change and getting people to think past, kind of that directing traffic, making sure stuff just gets done,
yeah,
to kind of being this person that's focused on other people's success. That's
yeah.
huge.
Unbelievably so. And if I could just pull on that a moment, Joel, I was out in region. I do a lot of my work in regional Victoria, and I was out with my son yesterday. He's on school holiday, so he's getting a few driving hours in, and I'm getting a little bit of think time going. And we popped into a couple of my clients on the way back, and this is, I want to create this little picture so people don't feel that to be a passionate leader or passion driven leader, you have to be this gregarious, out there, enthusiastic, let's go get them. No, in fact, the opposite works better. So I was with a business owner yesterday in the afternoon, going through his small. He runs a business where he specialises in small motors, whether that be ride-ons, motorbikes, all this sort of stuff. Ripping business. He's one of the quietest blokes I know. He's a young fella. He's in a business hub we run, and he's really quiet. And I thought, this is the guy that's going to struggle the most. He wouldn't even speak out in the room. And one night after a session, he came up to me and says, "Mark, this is going to be really helpful for me. I think I can get a lot out of it." I've gone, "Fantastic. That is awesome, Ryan. I'm sure you will." Now, he's grown, and his passion is not to be the big gregarious, go get him, up, attaboy. But he's starting to realize, and I was speaking to him yesterday, I said, "What are you getting out of the hub?" He says, "You know what? Every time I go, I pick up a few little items of gems from the group, and I apply them." So his passion is running his business to the best availability. Not about him. It's about what he can take and bring back in as a leader to make that business better. So, his passion is to learn. His passion is to adapt. He's got an open mind. He's not wedded onto, here's how they taught me in the MBA, or here's how I've always run it when it was my little shop. His passion is to explore opportunities and to get out of the way. And this particular fella challenged himself between meetings he was forced to get out of the way because he had an injured shoulder, and he reported back to the next meeting, "What did you do?" So he said, "I felt really guilty." So here's a clue why people hang on to that, "I've got to be the one running the show. I felt guilty I wasn't contributing." Well, guess what? You don't have to contribute like that anyway. This is why, another story. But what did you do? He said, "I got out of the way and I cleared the roadblocks for all the team." So
That's
what
great.
happened after that? He said, "We had a tenfold improvement in productivity." I said, "I'm sorry, Ryan, I didn't hear you clearly then." He said, "We had a tenfold improvement in productivity." So do you reckon this guy is now absolutely, he's on board. He's going, "Mate, we've got to take this right to the end." So, if that helps, that's a real live illustration of what you're saying. Remove the barriers. The leadership role is far different in young Ryan's mind now than it was 3 or 4 months ago when he started. The quietest guy in the room wouldn't speak. He's now contributing. He's now seeing things and he believes in himself now.
That's awesome. So Mark, if I spent any time on LinkedIn or on the internet or on Google searching about kind of leadership development or growing or building better leaders, there's a lot of advice out there. But I'd be interested in your perspective. What do you believe are the keys to improving a person's ability to lead?
Okay, well, particularly when we're talking about this passion-driven sort of thing, I think that the keys for me, if you wanted in 3 little steps, is be real, right? It's follow Dr. Brené Brown sort of stuff, read Dare to Lead and Dare Greatly and all that sort of stuff. But be human, show vulnerability, share openly with your team. And I think that in itself, once that happens, I've got another business leader that didn't change anything after a session, except he shared more openly with his team. Right? He came back and reported an amazing energy that was created when he shared and asked questions and invited people in. People want to be a part of your business, even though they may not demonstrate it. You've got to start. You're the leader. You're going to invite them in the right fashion. So being real helps people make that connection. So it builds on also what we were talking about before, Joel. When you're that out there, gregarious, so super, human, people don't know that that's real. They may not connect with that. So they want to see the warts and all real thing. We were talking beforehand, we're worried about what if the internet goes down? Well, if the internet goes down, it goes down. We'll work something out. People understand that sort of stuff. The more real we are with our people and our teams, the more people will say, hey, I'm a bit like that. I can get that. So that's the first one. The second one is play to your strengths. If you're out there like me, I can't do a lot about not being keen and enthusiastic. I've been like that as I reflect on for a long part of my life. Right? I know it'll probably annoy some people and push people away. I've got to be mindful of that. But we've got to play to our strengths, what our superpowers are, right? And remembering, and a lot of leaders, I find when I talk to them, don't have a strong belief in themselves. They say, oh, look, I'm a super smart tradie that started a business, or I had a cracking idea, but I don't really like managing people. Well, you had the guts to start the business, so give yourself a pat on the back for that. Or you had the guts to go out and do some leadership training and step into that space where no one else was game to go. There will always be a lot of people who sit back and go, oh, I've got a great idea, but I didn't start that business. Or I could lead this place better than that guy. Well, they didn't do it. You're the one there, right? And you had the courage to do that. So that's one of your strengths straight off. If you're saying, oh, I haven't got many strengths, well, yes, you have. You're in the role to start with. So play to that, right? The third thing is, and quite possibly the most important one, is care. Show people you care. There's no saying that, people won't listen to what you've got to say until they know you care about them. So show that, play those three things, care, play to your strengths and be real, will start creating the opportunity for people to connect, to listen, as long as you've got the open ears going.
Awesome. So be real, play to your strengths, and care. I think those are pretty simple things to be focused on. I've seen a couple of things come in the chat, and I wanted to go back to one here. Kind of scrolled up pretty quick because we had a bunch. Sarah asked the question, in the chain of command, there are different levels of leadership. How do we get a leader above us to grasp that passion for new ideas and change? And I see somebody else kind of agreed with that comment. Maybe share a little bit of your thoughts, and I can as well after, but when we have to work up the chain of command, right? It's one thing to work with our own leadership, but maybe we have leaders that don't understand that maybe their passion for things may be shutting other people down, or maybe they're just not being showing any passion and embracing some of the roles of leadership. What kind of advice would you have for Sarah?
Yeah, for me, it's about having open, real conversations, frank and fearless conversations. And again, if Sarah wanted to reach out, then I could go into this a lot more detail. It's as simple, literally, as 1, 2, 3. I've got a model around it that helps people. I was guiding some leaders through it yesterday to work through, but the key guts of it is to frame it. So set up a conversation where you're positioning what you want to talk about, and you're getting permission from the person who want to have a talk about it. Okay, you can't go in with we need you to do this, or we need you, because human nature is you push, people will instinctively or reactively just push back. So it's all about taking that calm approach and coming from part of the framing that I'm talking about is checking with your spirit of intent. What's your spirit of intent? Do you want the best for the business? Clearly. You would like to be a bit more inspired, a little bit more involved? Absolutely. Right? Versus some people might have an ulterior motive and they want to show this person up or something like that. No, that's not the right spirit of intent to come from, because your body language will communicate stronger than, that person may say, oh, this person's having a crack at me, I'm going to shut them down straight away. So it's frame a conversation where it goes along the lines of something like this, perhaps. I'd love to have a chat to you, leader, about where we're going, the culture, the leadership style, whatever the topic might be. Would you be open to having a conversation over a cup of coffee and talk about what might be possible, what we might be able to create, where we might be able to improve? I want to grow, I want to develop, I want to contribute to the place. With that sort of intention, right? And that sort of preparation, I would see it's very unlikely that that a person will say, oh no, we can't do that. So it's about how you set up that conversation to be in a psychologically safe environment. No one's going to be having a crack at each other. We just want to have a yak about how we could work together to make this a better environment to be productive and enjoyable in.
Yeah. No, and I love all that. Ditto. But one thing I'll add is I think it's important for us to understand if we're a leader of a team, sometimes that's where we kind of draw our boundaries. It's us and them. I think people sometimes need to recognize that the team doesn't end with those people. The team expands out to the leader above it, right?
Yep.
And so, this whole thought process around making sure the people on our team are set up for success, and I'm giving them every ability, or I'm removing barriers so they can be successful. I also have to extend that same thing to my boss, right? To the leader above me. And to your point, and to be frank and to have a conversation and say, hey, I'm committed to my team's success. I'm committed to this company's success and trying to reach the goals that we've set. But to do that, I need to provide you some feedback, some things that I'm seeing that may get in the way of that. And some people are going to be more open to that than others. But I think if you start from that position of like, hey, I'm trying to think of ways or work through ways that we can be as successful as we can be, and invite them into that conversation, that can be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that last word you said is the most important, I reckon. Invite them into the conversation. So as soon as you ask them, are you open to have such a conversation, you shift the accountability over to them. Right? And if they're a little bit tentative about it, you go, okay, that's okay. It doesn't have to be right now. We can do it next week. Because it's really important that person comes along willingly. So that key word you said there, invite. So that's a bit about getting permission. Get them involved. So would you be open to have that conversation and start teasing out some ideas that we might, so make it a real feeling. It is collaborative. It's not you downloading. So yeah, absolutely, Joel.
Yeah.
Hope that helps, Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah says, thank you. Great perspectives. Thank you. Justin, I see your comment here about, does this change at all as far as a philosophy or approach for remote teams or kind of a remote workforce? I think we could go into a lot of detail on that, and that might be something that we could carve off afterwards. You can either reach out to Mark or I, but here's what I would say about that. Early on, Mark had mentioned this adaptability, right? Inviting other people into the conversation, especially with a remote workplace or workforce, teams that are distributed, some at home, some on location. I think it's really important to have those conversations with them on how do we best communicate, right? And how can I set you up for success? For some, it's going to look different than others. You may have two people that are two separate people that are working out of their homes, and one's going to need something different from you than the other. And so just opening up that line of communication is going to be huge, and understanding that it's not going to be a one size fits all, and that there could be differences between the folks that are on site versus those that may be working virtually. So open up that conversation, solicit their feedback. And, from a passion perspective, be passionate about listening to that and trying to accommodate where you can.
Yeah.
So, Mark, the name of this series is Practical Leadership. And so I try to keep things simple. What would you suggest those people that are watching today do to kind of put this into real practical application this week? What could be one of the things they could start right away with?
One of the things I reckon is very simple, 4 words. Tell less, ask more.
And give me more on that. I think it's simple, but what does that look like?
So it's about believing what your role is, believing in yourself as a leader, demonstrating those 3 things about being real, playing your strengths and caring about people, and shifting your mind from feeling like you need to be the one telling everybody what to do and where to go and how to do it and when to take a breather, all that sort of stuff, to being comfortable enough to ask more. What we're trying to create is an environment where people are comfortable to speak up, so it's safe to talk, right? And what we're trying to trigger is the ability to get people to think. People will think a lot more. If you ask one question, people, whether it's a rhetorical question or a real question, people will think. If it's a good question, they might even put their eyes up and go, right? So if your goal is to get people more involved in your team, you want them thinking, not responding to what you're talking about. And they may, if you're talking and they're hearing this same old speech year in, year out, month in, week out, whatever, it's quite possibly not even registering. Whereas if you ask a well framed up question that's got some relevance to the business and is genuinely inviting that person to make a contribution, they are forced to think.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
So use your words powerfully rather than, and I remember back in corporate days with me, we used to do briefing sessions, you know, and let's get everyone involved in what we're doing as a business. They weren't briefing sessions. They were just monologues. Here's where we're going. Here's what we didn't really even make an effort to get people talking. All right. So I'm probably spending the second half of my working career trying to fix up all that mess, you know, and getting people generally feeling like, so tell more, tell less, ask more is really powerful. Yeah. Because what you're doing, David Rock wrote a book about quiet leadership, you know, about, you know, the quietest leaders can be the most powerful. That's why I was really at an end to say passionate leadership doesn't look like, you know, just rah the flag. It's actually, it can be done better with a quieter person that's more comfortable with setting themselves aside from being the need to be the center of focus and making the center of focus the team members and asking them good questions will engage the mind, get them thinking. That's what we're aiming at doing. These people often are running families, president of local sports clubs, kindergarten associations. They're really active people. And sometimes we find when they come into work, we say, look, just park your brain over there, get out there and just boom, 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 boom. So they switch off their thinking capacity. So the quickest way to get that started again to empower and engage people is start asking questions.
Yeah. Well, so a couple of people have commented on or put in the comments about our T-shirt game here. And we both have a passion for T-shirts, but Mark takes it up a notch. I think that could be a new T-shirt idea for you, Mark. Like tell less, ask more, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's funny, the T-shirts. You know the story with this, Joel. You know, I started my version at least of T-shirts just because we're doing so many Zoom meetings, and I was trying to make something a bit more entertaining for people on the other side of the Zoom screen. And then I started realizing they have quite a power. So I'm now in my fourth year. My fourth year T-shirt version comes out probably, if not next week, the week after. And I've stepped it up a little bit, Joel. So look out on the Thursdays with Mark sort of feed, and I'll launch a new range.
Yeah, if you're not following Mark, Thursdays with Mark, his video series, you got to be doing it. Well, I see we're kind of winding down on time. Here's what I want to throw out there for our viewers. First off, you know, LinkedIn can be used for a lot of things. Many of you come out here to search and network and do all kinds of stuff. But today I'd like you to ask you to use it as a little bit of a catalyst for action. And for some of you, for accountability. You've invested the time today, you know, roughly about a half hour so far, to try to become a more effective leader. And more specifically, you came to hear about what it means to be a passion-driven leader. But the problem with it is that investment of time is going to be completely wasted if you don't do something with it. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is, based on the discussion today, I want you to identify one simple thing that you could commit to over the next 7 days to take your leadership to the next level. And maybe it is this concept of telling less or asking more. It could be this concept of, instead of leading from the front, inviting other people to be part of the discussion. But I want you to find that one thing, the thing that you could commit to over the next 7 days and do, and I want you to drop it in the comments. And again, share as much or as little as you want, but drop that in there. And hopefully, if you join us for next week's session, what you can do at the beginning is just kind of share how things went, what kind of successes you had, maybe what challenges you ran into along the way, so that we can maybe provide not just some celebration for those of you that made some progress, but some support or maybe some ideas for those who may have run into a roadblock. So take 15 or 20 seconds now and drop that in the comments. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what comes in here before the end of the session. But as they are doing that, Mark, I want to thank you for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. We don't get to do it quite often enough, and I hope that changes as this year goes on. But I'm always energized after our conversations to even tackle some of the leadership challenges that I have. So thank you so much for being here.
It's an absolute pleasure, Joel. Thank you so much. It's a great honour to be your first guest on this series, and you are one of the good guys in the world that makes a genuine contribution. You're not asking for anything for doing this contribution. You're one of the world's really good people, mate. So it's an absolute privilege to be a part of your program. I'm sure it's going to make a big difference to a lot of people out there, mate. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's really kind. If you want to get a hold of Mark, you want to hear more about his work, or you have specific questions about what we talked about today, feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn. Mark is very active here. He has some fantastic posts and his weekly videos. If you haven't been following them, you should be doing that right away. He's a great follow. So feel free to reach out to him. So that really brings us up to the topic of next week. And so who's our next guest? Well, I'm excited to announce that Chris Taylor, CEO of Actionable in Toronto, Canada, is going to be exploring with me next week this topic of driving impact through habits. And so you can keep your eyes out on LinkedIn for the post for that event. Or if you'd like, drop a note in the chat and ask me to invite you, and I'll make sure you get a personal invite so you don't miss that session. Again, I'm going to really encourage you to take something that you heard today from the session and put it into practice as soon as today, as soon as 5 minutes after you get off this call, so you can be the leader that your team needs from you right now for them to be successful. And if you found this to be useful for you, please join us again next week. And if you're willing, share it with somebody else that you think could get some value out of it. And if you stumbled upon this video and we aren't connected on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out. Let me know that you saw the show, and we can connect. But regardless, I want to thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see you again next week. Blessings.